Today on Nerd Center, we're going to be talking about Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, the newest film to come out of the MCU as part of its Phase 4, and a movie that had so much potential to be a blockbuster, huge movie for the MCU, but yet failed in so many ways. Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness was built up to be the end of this multiverse saga as part of the MCU's Phase 4 that culminated things like WandaVision and Spider-Man No Way Home. And while it did kind of touch upon the multiverse, I feel like there's just so many aspects that they kind of missed or didn't address as well as I thought that they could have. Looking at it from Doctor Strange's perspective, it really doesn't follow up the original well because it's doing so much to try and tie into the rest of the MCU and what's gone on, whether it be an Endgame, No Way Home, WandaVision, and all the things that have kind of happened since then. And it's been several years since we got the original Doctor Strange, but I feel like a lot of that was kind of pushed to the side, and it's kind of following up more the MCU as opposed to following up more on Doctor Strange's own story. Now we get to this point and we are going to be spoiling this movie, so it's going to be a lot of spoilers for everything. So if you haven't watched it yet, just know it's going to be spoiled. So here's your warning, go ahead and we'll continue on. So this movie is going to be looking at Doctor Strange post Spider-Man No Way Home, as I mentioned, and Doctor Strange is not the Sorcerer Supreme, as we found out in Spider-Man, which is never touched on as far as him getting it back. So I kind of was hoping that they would maybe the mantle would go back to him at some point. But Wong kept it through the movie, and it's not that I have a problem with Wong, but it'd be nice to see Doctor Strange be the Sorcerer Supreme again. Not a very big gripe. Like Doctor Strange as a whole, I wouldn't say was a huge problem for me. I think he could have done a lot better, but he wasn't like one of the main problems that I found with this movie, and so we will touch on a little bit of that. I will say that how it didn't follow up from the last movie. Specifically, one thing I noticed was with Baron Mordo, who, as we saw in a post-credit scene, is starting to like hunt down sorcerers, and he's kind of turned his back on his fellow, magic users, I guess, as part of when he was being trained with Doctor Strange earlier. And now we've got to this point where we get to the point where he goes to another universe and meets Baron Mordo, and he talks about how the fact that he's been hunting him and all this stuff's happened. It sounded like there's this history that's happened that we never saw or was ever hinted at. So like we knew that he was turning, but we never got to see it. So Doctor Strange apparently had these battles with Baron Mordo that we never got to see. And that's kind of disappointing that they just kind of rushed over that, especially being that he's one of Doctor Strange's arch enemies. So it's kind of disappointing that we didn't get to see that play out on screen, and we did get a little bit of conversation about it, but yet again, they didn't show us it, and they just kind of brushed over all of that. And as well as some other little plots that they just kind of went on to the next movie without really touching on things like that, and that was kind of irritating that they just kind of brushed along because they wanted to get across their bigger MCU story instead of focusing more on Doctor Strange in his own movie. Now, this movie also starred, as with Doctor Strange, was America Chavez, which is one of the newer characters in the Marvel Comics, only made a few years back, and not a character that I care about necessarily. I wouldn't say that I hated her in the movie. I don't think she really added much. I feel like she was more of like a plot mover. Like it wasn't really someone I cared about in the movie. She just kind of helped move the plot along with Wanda and Doctor Strange, and she was just kind of there to help push things along. And I don't feel like she was kind of inconsequential. She did eventually do the thing at the end where she shows Wanda, teleports her to the dimension, and she sees the thing. So I guess she kind of had that, but it mostly was just kind of a plot moving along. So she wasn't really that character that I cared that much about in this movie, but she wasn't, like I said, I didn't hate her either. So Doctor Strange was done alright in some areas, but the one character that really got under my crawl about the missed opportunities and the way that it was handled was Wanda. Now, we get this directly after what we see in the events of WandaVision, where she enslaves the town, and makes her family and brings Vision back, and then eventually she gets released and she goes in hiding and she takes the Darkhold and she becomes a Scarlet Witch. And so we pick up after that, and apparently she's now evil because she's been reading the book, and so she's like pure evil now. Like she just like straight up murders so many people in this movie. And what you like in what we talked about looking at WandaVision, you thinking maybe there was someone else pulling the strings, maybe there was something else going on, but no, it was Wanda the whole time being this evil character. And it's really a missed opportunity here. Like in WandaVision, for there not being a big bad behind the scenes kind of pulling the strings that's kind of like making Wanda turn the way that she has. So it's not all just her becoming evil because she read the Darkhold. During the movie, they do reference Chthon, as we see here, and he is who created the Darkhold, and this would have been a really cool opportunity for them to kind of have him come into the picture. He could have been the one that had been the driving force behind Wanda wanting to get into the other multiverses and being using her children to kind of advance his own goals by whispering and putting those things into her head. That could have been a good way to like kind of use him to like kind of manipulate Wanda into doing these things, because I feel like just making Wanda like flat out the villain and just like go full evil was just not the right way to handle this. So if they could have used someone like that, or even come back to Mephisto, something could have happened in WandaVision with Mephisto pulling the strings with her kids, because that's a huge part of Wanda and her kids and all that was Mephisto, and we still haven't gotten him in anything. And they didn't touch on any of that. And the one that was a prevalent theme throughout the movie was dreams. And who is a big dream villain in Doctor Strange? Nightmare. Not a peep from Nightmare. Nightmare could have been in the one that planting these things in Wanda's hand. She's having the dreams about her kids, and that's fueling him, from her nightmares, and connected to Doctor Strange and him having dreams connecting to different people in the multiverse. So like it all could have been connected through Nightmare, and he's the one that's like kind of that's how you can dream and you can see the other characters, like they mention. You can see other lives of your multiverse counterparts. That could have all been tied through Nightmare, and he could have been the one pulling the strings in the background. So they had all these different villains that they could have gone with throughout the movie that could have been like the one kind of big bad that was kind of like controlling it all, and they kind of missed everything. And I don't know if they did it purposely or they just didn't know, because like we had the person who wrote WandaVision didn't even know who Mephisto was till after they made the show. So we either have completely incompetent people making these shows, or are they just missing all these opportunities to bring in these characters? They could have done it instead of going with the route they did and making Wanda just basically pure evil. And even going into more stuff from Wanda, they had all of the stuff with Mount Wundagore, and that's tied to her past. And we had Professor Xavier in this little scene where he's talking to Wanda, and that could have connected her to her true parentage and tied in Magneto and brought in the X-Men and mutants and all this different stuff that they could have touched upon even subtly. They could have helped to kind of build things going forward that they missed in this. And because that was tied to where her home was, and it's tied to her past and her parents, and they did use Mount Wundagore and kind of tie it to her being the Scarlet Witch, but they could have done it so much better had they tied it more to her past based on more like the comic book origins. They could have tied all this, and they could have helped been a way to kind of bring and weave the X-Men and mutants into the MCU a little better. I don't know exactly how they're going to do it, but I think that would have been something they could have done to kind of tie things into it. We also had the fact that the Vision is never brought up or entered into the fray at all. After him being a pivotal player, and we have the White Vision who left at the end of WandaVision, and he was nothing, she never thought about him, it never popped into her head, nothing of the sort came into play here with the Vision. Maybe the Vision could have helped got to her, maybe he could have done something to like kind of calm her down. But they didn't have anything tied with Vision and the kids or nothing, so that was kind of odd that they didn't include Vision in anything in this. And then at the end, we don't know if Scarlet Witch might be dead. I think, at least what I saw, there was like a blast of magical energy, like a small one, and that could have been just the aftershock of her bringing down Mount Wundagore, or that could have been her kind of escaping. That's kind of what I thought just watching it initially. But I wouldn't doubt that we'd probably see Wanda again. But there's just like a lot of things they could have done. They could have maybe done some kind of version of, House of M, maybe. Well, I guess that was kind of what they did in WandaVision, maybe. But there's just, Wanda was what bothered me a lot. There were just so many different routes they could have taken that would have been way more better than what they actually ended up going with in the movie. Now getting to the big thing that a lot of people are probably talking about, the cameos. Now, the cameos honestly didn't surprise me. I hadn't seen any leaks or anything. I heard that there may have been some out there. I didn't see them, but I kind of figured we knew Professor Xavier was probably going to be in it because we heard his voice in the trailer. And I kind of suspected with the Illuminati type thing, we might get a Mr. Fantastic. Black Bolt was a surprise. I wasn't expecting that. But I wasn't really super shocked when I saw Mr. Fantastic and John Krasinski playing him. That's kind of a little bit of fan service, I guess, because that's been a person who people have really wanted to play the role. And so, but I just feel that these, a few years ago, that these cameos would have been so cool, and I would have been psyched to see all this. But now I'm just like, oh my gosh, I just didn't feel it. And I also know that they're just showing us this because this is not what you're going to get when you see the X-Men and Fantastic Four. They pretty much did the fan service of seeing Professor X and Mr. Fantastic being kind of who people would want them to be casted as. But my guess is that neither of them are going to be in the actual MCU adaptations of the X-Men and Fantastic Four. It's going to be someone completely different and a completely different thing. So this was kind of just like, here we're going to give you what you want just to kind of keep you satisfied, but we're really going to do something else in the movies. So if you're expecting to see like the Fantastic Four that a lot of people have been wanting, with like John Krasinski and Emily Blunt playing Reed and Sue, probably not going to happen. I could be wrong, but I'm guessing that was probably the closest you're going to get to seeing that in live action. Then we had the fact that these characters were pretty much made a mockery of in the little bit of time there. They're just basically destroyed right off the bat by Scarlet Witch, like in just humiliating fashion. Black Bolt gets his mouth sealed and blows his own head in like the second, and then Mr. Fantastic gets shredded apart like string cheese, and like just immediately they didn't even fight or do nothing at all. It was completely embarrassing, and it was completely just humiliating to these characters to just get destroyed. And yeah, Scarlet Witch is a powerful character, but they didn't do a darn thing. And the fact that they just killed them off right back, two very prominent, powerful characters in Marvel Comics, and they just boom, they just destroyed them without even putting up a fight. They did let the two characters that people, at least I didn't really care as much about seeing. Like we got Captain Marvel as Monica Rambeau's mom. I don't know why she was Captain Marvel, but we got her, and we got Captain Carter. I don't know why she's on Illuminati either. I don't even know. I assume this is the one from What If, because I don't know how many universes she's Captain Carter in. So now we know what happened to her. She gets chopped in half. So yeah, and the Illuminati got destroyed, and I was surprised, even though they didn't really show it, that they had that brutal of kills, like getting chopped in half with their own shield. Like they didn't show it, obviously, like but they, you know what happened. But it was really just humiliating to these other characters to just get killed off like that, and it just really shows how Marvel thinks of these characters. Like there was like so much symbolism in them just destroying Mr. Fantastic, Black Bolt, and then eventually snapping the neck of Charles Xavier. Like it just was like really a slap in the face to me, of the comic book reader, just wondering what they're going to do with these properties moving forward. Like the Fantastic Four and X-Men, I have no idea what they're going to do, but I am scared to death of what they're going to do with these characters. That's just so much symbolism of what Marvel's done, and it was really kind of disappointing to see, and it kind of took out any kind of excitement from seeing these characters finally on the big screen as part of the whole MCU. So ultimately, Doctor Strange really just had so much potential to be a really cool movie, but they focused too much on the larger MCU and not enough on the Doctor Strange mythos and what's going on there, I feel like. And then the fact that they also wanted to make this an Endgame type movie, but they didn't really build it up the same way that Endgame was built up. We got a couple movies kind of building towards it, but they never really completely built up to this big thing. It was just kind of like, just a movie, part of the multiverse. It wasn't like this kind of built up like it should have been. Not to mention that it kind of ignored things that happened in other MCU things, like where on earth is going on with Loki show where we got Kang? Like nothing to do with the multiverse, and Kang is just completely gone and like nothing to do with it. And like it's crazy. They're ignoring their own stuff and they're just kind of building up and doing these kind of movies that just aren't as good as they used to be. Like the first Doctor Strange was so much better than this film, and it was just, all I can say is it's just so much missed opportunity. Missed opportunity. It was not the worst film I've ever seen by far in the MCU, but it was just such a like, you could have done better than this, like for this movie that's supposed to be this big a deal. And it's really just kind of disappointing to see how they went, how they handled things. Like I said, Wanda was my particular pet peeve. Doctor Strange could have been better, but not horrible. America Chavez was just there, kind of And the cameos, while might have been kind of cool, they really did not handle the cameos well. They could have had these cameos in it and treated these characters so much better and with more respect. And I really hate that they did what they did with these characters and the way that they handled things like Wanda. But that's kind of what we've expected for people who are really seeing what's going on in the MCU and not just blinded by the MCU and the fact that things have changed and this is not really the same as it used to be. And it's kind of sad because they had some really cool movies, and we have another one coming up with Thor, and I don't know that I'm going to see it. We'll see. I might check it out eventually, but it's really just like I'm just not caring as much anymore. And this is just kind of sad, but we'll see what happens, and we'll see where the MCU goes next and how this all ties in. So guys, let me know what you think. Are we gonna get these like Fantastic Four and X-Men? Are they gonna be the guys we saw in the movie, or are we gonna see completely new characters? And what kind of stories do you think we're gonna see going forward from these franchises? Also, what do we think was going for Doctor Strange now that Clea, as we saw in the post-credit scenes, being added? And what do you guys think of this movie? Was it missed potential, or did Marvel do it right for you? Or did you think that maybe they should have brought in some of these other villains or other characters to kind of work things better? Let me know what you think. Like and subscribe to the channel, and we'll talk to you next time.